Not a bad view, right? I mean, I think if you're a dirt bike nut, like probably most of you are that are watching this, having a full fleet of brand new motorcycles in your garage is, I mean, I think it defines dream garage. And luckily, this is not the first time I've had all these bikes, or not these exact bikes, but 6, one from each OEM lined up. This is the 6th year I've done a 450 shootout. First year under my own branding. I worked for Vinyl MX for the last 5 years, almost 6 years in total, but last 5 years I did their 450 shootout. Now that I'm on my own, I wanted to do one for myself. I always was proctored, in charge, and the main test rider for those, so I knew what to do, how to line it up, but I also wanted to do something a little bit different. But as you can see around me, this is the representation of the 2020 450 motocross fleet. We got our Kawasaki KX450, Yamaha YZ450F, our KTM 450 SXF, Husqvarna FC 450, Suzuki RM-Z450, and Honda CRF450R. A little bit different than how I've done these before though. Typically these bikes, if you see these media outlets do a shootout, those bikes are all handed off by the OEMs. They're part of a press fleet. Whether you're in the automotive industry, motorcycle, cycling, the majority of the bikes that are tested come from that manufacturer. They have press fleets where they prep the bikes and get them all ready for us. And typically, yeah, we go out to a bike intro or a model launch with them, get all the technical info from them and get to test with them and just learn more about those machines. And once that's all wrapped up, we usually get those machines later to use in these comparison tests. This year I wanted to do things a little bit differently. I wanted to have that real consumer experience. I have bought motorcycles myself, of course, just before my job as well, like anybody. I've bought bikes, but it's been a few years, definitely. So I wanted to go out and buy all 6 of the motorcycles you see here, get them off the showroom floor, have to break them in myself, prep them myself, and deal with them like anybody watching this video is going to, because it is a little bit different. When we go to a model intro, the bikes are already broken in, OEMs have already gone through, broke them in, re-prepped everything on, re-greased them, changed all resell clutches, etc., etc. In this case, now it's on to me to treat this like a normal consumer would. So I picked up all these bikes through Chaparral Motorsports. Of course, they're a big supporter of my channel. A huge thank you to those guys to letting me manage this, because I still had to buy a few of these things and it definitely hurt the wallet a little bit. But I think it's well worth it for the experience that I'm getting to gain this week with a slew of test riders, quite a few that I used priorly at my former job, and then a couple new ones, such as a fan favorite of this channel, because I know most of the people that watch my content come from his, is Jeff Walker. He's in town to help me with this. So I took all these bikes, broke them in myself, re-prepped them. So we entered the shootout with about an hour and a half on each machine. I went through and dynoed them and weighed them. And now we're in the middle of our test phase. We've got the bikes. We're going to spend 3 days, 3 different tracks, spending an even amount of time on each motorcycle, making the changes that you can do off the showroom floor. And what I mean off the showroom floor is I pretty much consider that anything you can do with your standard toolbox with you, a screwdriver, a T-handle, those kind of items. So for the majority of these bikes, the electronics are limited to what is free, whatever the map switches are there on the bike. And in the case of the Yamaha, we can play with their app a little bit on the phone because that is a free item. And then on that, it's stuff you can do with a screwdriver, such as the clickers on the fork and shock. And anything we can try to change with the balance between fork height and sag and torque settings with a wrench. Basically, I said all things that somebody off the showroom floor can do to their bike, because, well, I know some people would like to see, a shootout with a bunch of money placed towards each bike, or that what they consider real land. I know plenty of people that buy 450s and basically will ride them bone stock, if not bare bone stock, most of the year. And that's what we're trying to decide here. We want to share all the information about what the base characteristics are of these bikes, because I value shootouts. I value doing this piece, and for one major reason. I'm not saying whichever bike wins this shootout is the bike you have to go buy, like it's going to be perfect for you. It definitely means it is the most rounded machine in the group characteristic-wise. It suits the widest range of riders. But as you'll see, especially dealing with multiple test riders' comments, that not each bike is a perfect fit for that person. We're going to agree on certain aspects of these bikes, and that's why I consider the base attributes that are good about the motorcycle. Then there are the stuff we're going to disagree on with each other. Some of us may like the motor on one bike, and one of us may not. And that comes down to what we look for in the bike, how our riding style is, how it suits us. And that's ultimately what we try to do by feeding all that information to you, the viewer. So if you're going to go out and buy one of these motorcycles, you can listen to everybody's comments and try to figure out which person is the closest to you, which one's describing the bike enough that you're like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Whether that's the 3rd place bike, the 2nd, or the 5th place bike, I just want people to know that watch this thing, what bike they should be buying for themselves, which one is going to suit them to a T and get them the best riding experience, instead of getting the bike, spending a bunch of money, chasing an attribute that's maybe not there or really hard to get out of that bike. Because once again, yeah, we're all gonna spend a little money on the bikes probably once we get them, but we wanna try to get you that bike that suits you the best out of the box, so you can just target the couple little items on it that'll really get you to the best riding experience possible. As for the test itself, all 5 test riders are kind of gauged with the exact same situation. We give them a very even but short amount of time on each bike each day, so they'll circulate back through. If you give a test rider too long on a motorcycle, yeah, they can learn a lot about it, but they'll tire themselves out so much they won't give an even effort on every bike. So we do a lot of short stints across all 3 days to rotate the guys through as quickly as possible, so they also get to experience every motorcycle at each track in a morning fresh condition and a late afternoon rough condition as well. Along with one of the days, we always try to work with the guys from Lit Pro to get some data. A lot of people question, publishing that data. We're going to try to do some of that this year, but there's always pluses and minuses based on what the person rides personally, they'll typically be quick on, and what time of day they ride the bike. We personally use the data though when we are kind of going through our decisions. I try to look at it for consistency in data. There are some bikes you can be really fast on for one sprint lap, but over a 5-lap period, it's really hard to hold that time. The bike isn't that consistent. It doesn't have great recovery character. There are some bikes, yeah, it's 3/10 off your best lap time, but you knocked out all 5 of those within a 1/10 or 2 of that range instead of being up or down a second to lap. So there's stuff like that we try to use with the data. Like I said, we're gonna be really open about the horsepower figures. I'll actually release a separate video with some of the dyno runs and talking to Chad at XPR that helped me run through those to kind of explain from his side of like an engine guy, what he looks for on the dyno, what he thinks each bike would do from a characteristic. But like I said, then you can match that up against the rider's comment and seeing how those engines and that performance works on track, because amazing number on the dyno doesn't always mean the best situation on the track or the most rideability. And sometimes a bike with a low number, yeah, it can feel slow. And sometimes with a bike with a low number is actually really pliable and really usable. As for the actual gauge of how these guys pick their ending, I always give them the exact same thing or same question at the end. Which motorcycle out of this group can you take as we're able to set them up out of the box and want to go race for the year? Because naturally a lot of guys are going to look at a motorcycle like, well, I really like this one attribute of the motorcycle, I'm going to dump a bunch of money into it. Typically it's the kind of bike we see those guys actually personally ride quite often, but it's maybe a brand they have an affinity to, they have good support on, something of that nature. But to try to bring out the bias and try to eliminate it, I basically tell them like, hey, if you couldn't do anything else, which one of these could I tell you to go line up at your local track and race this weekend, and you'd be happy to do it without questioning yourself, without questioning what's going on with the bike? And that's pretty much simply where we end it. And for each guy, it's a little bit different situation. In the case of Jeff Walker, that's lining up for a national. In my case, that's just lining up maybe an off-road or a local moto race again. I don't do any more like serious racing. A couple other things, like I said, to kind of give you guys an idea of this test. We bought all these bikes. I have not let an OEM touch them. The OEMs will be available on the final day of testing to throw in some technical information, give some guys some advice on some setup tips, stuff that we can pass on to you, the viewer, but at no point have any of them been allowed to touch these motorcycles. Me and one of my test riders have been the only person to wash, prep, just change, just pretty much take care of anything on these bikes. The only thing that has been changed from the showroom floor has been the tires. Reason being, all but one of these bikes is on Dunlops, so we went ahead and partnered up with Dunlop to supply all the bikes, along with the fact that quite a few of them this year, because we're in a bit of a transfer of a product range, a few of them are still coming with the MX-3S, which is an outgoing tire, and nobody can actually go out and buy those anymore. The OEMs had a big batch of them, so they're running them. But in this case, we moved on to their newer product range, the MX-33. It does give us a great baseline across all bikes. It is the most common tire in the marketplace, so the info coming from that is probably the most usable. And it makes our life easier being able to actually have fresh tires on these bikes instead of having them already wore out from the break-in period and then not having the ability to replace them throughout the test. And as I joked before the beginning of this is not exactly a cheap idea. It is not cheap to go and buy every motorcycle. Even when I worked for a media outlet, I proposed this idea and we didn't exactly go for it because it's kind of hard to sit on $60,000 of motorcycles in one shot. And then we did this out of pocket. Everything you see on this channel is just supported by a couple brands. Some of the ones you'll see in this shootout, DCMX Tool, Epoxy at SoCal, Fox Racing, Oakley, Specialized, Chaparral, they're the people that allow me to do this. but it still eats into things. If you're interested, I started a Patreon. We're doing some amazing contests there. I'm going to be giving away Pro Riders jerseys, a lot of product every month. If you have a couple bucks to spare, jump on there, sign up. Helps me a lot to keep doing this. We want to do this going into 250 shootout and more bike intros and bike shootouts like this in the future. I'd like to go about buying the equipment, like to go about buying some of the product you see and try to keep it as genuine as possible and give the end user the best information possible. Now, totally understand everybody doesn't have a couple bucks laying around a month. If not, just make sure you hit subscribe, hit like, throw a bunch of comments in, and that's the really important part. As we go through this shootout, you're gonna see the final content. When we're done with this, we're gonna release a video that is kind of the broad overview. I'm gonna go through and give you about 2.5 minutes on each motorcycle, how they finished in that place and how the rankings got there. Then we're gonna break down each bike individually over the following 1.5 to 2 weeks with individual videos in each bike with the comments from each test rider and how they ranked it there and try to give you guys a better idea why that bike fell where it did overall, what those good attributes and those bad attributes of that machine are. Like I said, other than that, we've got some dyno stuff coming up and just a lot of stuff to give you guys what I'm trying to feel like is a much deeper experience from a shootout other than just one video says it all. If there is anything else you want to know about these bikes, anything else you want to know about the test, just anything regarding shootout in general, hit the comments section below. I'll try to go through and answer them all. We'll try to bring them up in future videos. And I also want to know what you, the end user, wants to see in shootouts, and we can try to tweak this format in the future. Of course, ahead of time, I will say one that a lot of people always bring up is set up the suspension on all the bikes. Well, that only suits the one person in the shootout you set it up for. If you want to make it a one-man shootout, it works. But things like the tires, the way we go about the dyno, the way we go about weighing them, linkage curves, I think there's some really good info that I'm really curious to see what you, the user, wants to see from these features going forward, and even what we can still manage to pull off during this shootout and get to you guys to watch. So keep an eye out on this channel over the next few days. We'll start to leak out a little bit more and more of this content, but once it hits the main shootout video over the following 2 weeks, we will be dropping videos nearly every day going through everything. So make sure you hit subscribe, and thanks for watching.